Oh man, oh man, oh man. Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. We are going to have some fun today. We are going to be talking about ageism, and I will tell you the one thing that is true is all three of us agree that there is ageism and that ageism is a problem. But I can promise you that we do not see it the same way. We are not even close. You're going to see that in just a minute. But let's get started with this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. So, before we get started, I want to talk to you about paying for overtime in your senior living communities. I know how much you hate it. I have been in some meetings and operational meetings with a couple of operators over the last few months. And one of the things they talk about with concern is when their overtime numbers are going way up. And conversely, and it's more fun this way, when they brag about how they paid little or no overtime. I don't know if I've ever been in any organization where they've said, we've got it down to zero, but I was talking to somebody that was down to just, I don't know, a few hours a month across their enterprise, and it was really cool. So one of the ways that you can avoid overtime, mostly I talk about it with agency, but one of the ways that you can avoid overtime is using KARE with a K to fill in those staff rather than using overtime, because oftentimes they're less expensive than even paying overtime. And so it's this great opportunity to control costs. And of course, we talk every week about how you can also use KARE to fill those shifts that you would otherwise fill with traditional staffing agencies that cost. We don't even like to talk about it because when you look at those agency bills, I know that your accounting people sit there and they cry tears for all the money they're paying. And this is a way to dry up the tears and make that all go away. And so if you're struggling with staffing at all, you should talk to our friends at KARE. I want to say big thanks to them for sponsoring Foresight TV. So Meg and Jordan, let's put us up side by side here for a second, and then you can take me down. I want to do a couple introductions here from my perspective. So Meg, we have known each other for, 8 or 10 years. You've done some writing for us at Foresight. You're an amazing thought leader in the senior living space and the anti-ageism space. Jordan, I've known you less time, but you've been deeply, deeply involved in some of our live streams. And both of you just have amazing passion for the senior living industry and for older people. And I'd like to actually start by having you talk a little bit about who you are, what you're passionate about, and a little bit about art against ageism. And Meg, you go first.
Yeah, Meg, go first.
I will go first. So first I'll talk about Art Against Ageism. We are a nonprofit organization. We like to call ourselves an alliance that identifies, amplifies, and creates artistic endeavors that confront and tackle ageism. And Jordan and I co-founded the organization just over 2 years ago, mostly because we saw how much ageism there was in the, especially that arose during the pandemic, and we could see it in affecting folks who were living in nursing homes and assisted living communities. So we got together and decided to try to do something about it. And because both of us love art so much, we discovered something called artistic activism, and we married the two together, and that's how Art Against Ageism came about.
Yeah, that's how it started. Actually, Meg and I met discussing artistic activism when she taught a class at UMBC, the Erickson School of Aging, on how art can be used to confront and tackle any ism. And so that's what we try to take with artistic activism to the anti-aging space. Meg is as Meg and I, we work with different communities to create this art, and we do it in different ways. So we actually have some awesome murals coming up. We also do an Own Your Age booth, which we have a simple photo booth where people go in and they take the time to own their age. And my dog's making a lot of noise right now, and I don't know why. But yeah, so we strive to really take these conversations about ageism, which are sometimes awkward and hard, and make them fun and make them inspirational, because we really want to affectively change these conversations instead of effectively, because no one ever changed their mind about anything by signing a petition or by reading a list of facts, but by having something that really inspires them.
Very well put, Jordan.
So I love this. I'm actually, just for fun, there's a clip that's been going around. I've seen it on TikTok, I've seen it on Instagram and on YouTube, and I just want to play it. And then I'm going to ask you both: is this ageism or is it something else? So let me grab this video. Wait a minute, I'm operationally challenged here. Share screen. And here we go.
This doesn't look dangerous. It don't look dangerous. To everybody over 40, was like, boy, don't you hurt yourself. Everybody over 40 wouldn't dare think about jumping down here. We already know our foot gonna hit that ground and our leg gonna do something weird and our kneecap gonna come off. When you are over 40, you know how to get down off of things properly. Hand down, foot down, pause, release. Safe. This is the
Okay, hang on, I gotta stop the sound there, and here we are. Okay, so Jordan and Meg, is that ageist or not?
Absolutely.
Meg, go ahead.
Technically, it is ageist. Yes, it is humorous. I'll admit that, but it's ageist because the comedian is making a stereotype about all people over 40. So yes, it is.
Jordan.
I hate to do this to you, Steve, but so like, yes, it's ageist. It's, of course it's ageist, but yes. And it is a true story for a lot of people. Like, I mean, yes, there's a true narrative in there. Like, my grandfather has always told me you have 2 legs and 1 back. So when I do things like lift things that are too heavy, like you do as a young man, and you just pick things up, and he's like, why are you picking all that up? You can do multiple trips. And so like, there's a certain like funniness about, having that, getting yelled at for jumping off the back of the truck, which I did get yelled at a bunch of times. And like, one day you won't be able to do that. Like, that's a real story that lots of people can identify with. And that's why it's funny. But
Megan,
when you make broad strokes about any people group, it's ageist. Just like it's racist when you say all Black people are great at basketball. And there are a lot of jokes that make that joke. Like,
yes.
White boy can't jump. It's like playing on that joke that like all Black people, and while it is a positive stereotype, it's still a stereotype and thus is racist, because I tell you, I'm terrible at basketball. And I grew up with my little brothers playing basketball, asking me to go out on the court, and I'm like, I will sit and watch, I'll ref, I'm not handling the ball. And so like, yeah, it's ageist. And so, yeah, we should have a conversation about why people are always assuming that people who are older, and I don't want to be too long-winded, but why people who are older can't do certain things and then put them in a box, because then people see that, and because it's so funny, it primes us to believe that older adults can't do certain things.
Meg, and then I'm going to jump into this as well, but I want to give you a shot here. You had something you wanted to say.
Well, he said he kept saying it's a true story or it's real. And I disagree because I think you can be over 40 and still jump off the back of a truck. And you cannot possibly say at what age you might stop jumping off the back of a truck. I think that's a really, and there are people who are, by the way, over 40, over 50, any age, who are not smart enough to figure that out. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're going to become wiser about it. So.
So, I guess I sort of agree that that's true. I would bet you wouldn't find a single 80-year-old who'd be jumping off a truck like that. And maybe you might find one or two. I guarantee you wouldn't find any 90-year-olds who are jumping off a truck like that. And if somebody's 90 and still kicking, they're going to be in pretty good health, right? And this is actually a really important conversation right now. There's obviously been a lot of talk, particularly about President Joe Biden and his fitness relative to his age, and some talk about Trump relative to his fitness because of age. And I find myself as somebody who is almost 70 years old, looking at that and thinking it's actually not age, because frankly, I know some people who are much older than Biden, who I would trust to be president because they're sharp, and there are a lot of people I know who are in their 40s and 50s who I would be horrified to have as president because because they don't have enough wisdom. And we were talking a little bit. I don't think we'll play the clip, but if for those of you who are old enough, is that an ageist thing to say? I don't think that's ageist, because this is just calendar stuff. Right? Is that back in 1984? When President Reagan was running against Walter Mondale, there were some real questions about Reagan as whether or not he was too old to be president, because at the time he was the oldest president we'd ever had. And his team knew the question would come from a moderator. They were terrified. And Reagan went to his team. He didn't tell them what he was going to do, but he said, "I got this handled." And so when the question came up, moderator asked this question, and he got this very straight face, and he sort of looks over at Mondale and he goes, I've made a commitment that I'm not going to bring up age. I'm not going to hold the lack of experience and youth of Walter Mondale against him in this candidacy. And it was done just artfully. It got a big laugh, and there are a lot of people who think that really solved this problem. So I guess the thing that I struggle with, is the truth of the matter is that for most of us, while it varies a little bit, there are things that we can't do that our physical capabilities, and particularly drop off as we grow older. And so to make fun of that or to talk about that because they are related to age, I think you would call ageism, and I would say maybe it's a way of dealing with the changing in conditions. So I'm going to shut up now and let you guys respond to all that.
So I'm sorry, Steve. So the last thing you said was, you were saying that being older helps people. Is it the humor you were saying helps people deal with a changing condition?
Yeah.
I mean, I do see it as a kind of gallows type humor. I hear it. I hear people all the time make jokes about their physical abilities or lack thereof related to things that they believe are all because they are older. And it is true that our body does wear down over time. Yes. And we do adapt to things. We adapt to pain. We adapt to inflammation that may happen. Some of the things that happen to us are because we are older. Some are not. And I think to make jokes about it and make light of it, yes, is a way to deal with it. And I do think, though, that it can become when it's done too much or done in harmful way, it can be done in harmful ways. And the best way to deal with it, I think, is to make it a positive and try to advance positive age beliefs. So,
Jordan, other thoughts? Well, one thought I had that I really want to talk about is, this whole idea that it's ageist to chronologically reference something. We live in the age of the internet. And it's so often so funny, like, someone will say, you're too young to remember. And I'm like, but I'm not too young to Google. I'm old enough to Google what you're referencing. I'm not old enough to live it. But of course, like it's not ageist to say like you're too young to remember this. Like acknowledging that I've lived these lived experiences and that these experiences are true and they're my own is fair to say. And so I think that so often we want to be age blind and we want to just like ignore the things that kind of just make us different. And we're stepping over the things that make us different so awkwardly, like even just acknowledging that like I wasn't coherent. I wasn't an experienced adult through 9/11. I don't know what it was like to live and fly before 9/11. That's something I'll never experience. I can watch it on a movie, but I'll never experience that. And that is your shared experience. But there's shared experiences that I have with others that like are different. And so, and then, younger kids will never understand certain things. So it's a shared thing that we should acknowledge and celebrate. And then that's how we get to acknowledge and celebrate people's stories because they're different and they have something to bring to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that a lot, Jordan. I mean, I have such vivid, I can tell you I was sitting and eating frosted Honey Nut Cheerios when 9/11 happened because I had a flight to catch from LA to San Jose that morning. I can replay that. And of course, it's not the same as you doing that. But on the flip side, when I was a kid growing up, there were all of these people who were in their 30s and 40s who were World War II veterans or who had lived through World War II. And I remember, I was doing as a kid, my dad was interested in flying. And so we're around these guys who'd been pilots during World War II. And I was just in complete awe of them. But it was only storytelling, right? I couldn't do that. And of course, the advantage that people who are younger, your age and even younger and in the future will have is they'll get to have a much more visceral experience because of the internet and how much more video and those kinds of things we have. And it's just different. So I think you make a really good point. I think that I see a couple of challenges. I think the first thing is that, and I'd like to have you speak to this, is that I'd like to have my younger body back. I'd like to be out snow skiing and I'd like to be able to hike at the same level. But I'm actually not that crazy about if I had to go back with I had to give up all the knowledge and the experience and the wisdom I've gained over the last 20 years and give that up too. I'm not sure I'd make that trade. And I think that the challenge is that we don't value perhaps as we should that wisdom and those kinds of things.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. We don't value those kinds of, I don't think we can all assume that someone is wise just because they are older. I think that's an important point where there's a lot of that out there now today about how we should revere older people because they're wiser. Not everyone is wiser just because they are older, but it's pretty safe to say that having so much experience behind you and knowledge inside that you've attributed or acquired over the many years of your life, let's say, that you are likely could be wiser than someone who's much, much younger. But I think that, and I agree with you also, Steve, about thinking about my younger body and the abilities that it had that were made it much easier for me to run. For example, I can't really run anymore because my knees are pretty worn out. So I agree with that, but I would not definitely take back where I am right now in my space and in my head.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I had this blog that I started a few years ago called Age in America. And I went around and interviewed people who lived in nursing homes and assisted living. They were people who were in senior centers, just older adults. And it was very similar to Humans of New York. And one of the questions I always asked everyone was, do you wish you were younger? And I just became fascinated by the fact that I would say 98% of the people said, no, I do not wish I was younger. And this was across all living settings, which was really fascinating to me.
Well, so you bring up a really good point. The part of the thing that makes life so interesting and so challenging is that regardless of where we are at, we tend to think everybody thinks more or less like we do, right? So, I'll give you a very simple example. For many years, the idea of touching a dead body was just really creepy and creeped me out. And yet I was there when my dad passed, and I was there shortly after my mom passed, and it was not creepy at all. I mean, those were the people that had raised me and had grown up with me. And I find that largely where younger people don't want to talk about death very much, it's scary, it's creepy, that as people get older, I mean, you trust me, as you get older, you start thinking about it, you realize that, your life is not going to last forever, and that you need to be talking about it and thinking about it as you head towards that. So I think that's really fascinating. Jordan, you're the youngest of the three, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
In talking about ageism in itself, it's such a hard conversation to have, and to kind of have these conversations reflecting on other isms and combating other isms, because it's the only thing where you will be the other person, or you're othering someone else, and then you will be the other. And I think one of the biggest things in combating intergenerational relationships that you can take away from combating other isms is the intergenerational relationships. Because if you don't have anyone older around you to tell you the things that you've just said, talking about just the experience of aging, and talking about, well, I got older, I experienced this, and enjoy where you are now. Enjoy the experience of aging. Enjoy being whatever age you are right now. Then you do start to otherize, and then you start to other yourself because you never had positive age positive role models. And so that's why we've kind of talked around age positivity a lot. And so I do want to dive a little bit deeper in what is this thing that we've been saying, age positive beliefs. And so age positive belief simply is it's simply age, to take from Ashton. One of the things that Ashton says is they talking about age accurate beliefs, or accurate age beliefs.
I believe she prefers the term correct age beliefs, but positive age beliefs, correct age beliefs are important.
But positive age beliefs comes from Becca Levy and Becca Levy's research on how your age beliefs, be them positive or negative, can affect your aging. And Becca Levy is a researcher. She just wrote a book that she published in 2022 called Breaking 21.
I think it was a few years ago that it published, but
still very recent research when it comes to ageism. And it's called Breaking the Age Code. And so she works with a longevity study here that's done here in Maryland. She does a lot of research around age beliefs, and found that your age beliefs, be them positive or negative, can have a 7.5 year effect on your age.
Yeah, she looked at a longitudinal study, is what she looked at the results of a longitudinal study that had been done. I believe it actually had been done in Ohio. And she discovered, yes, that the folks who held what she coined positive age beliefs lived an average of 7.5 years longer, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So you may or may not know this, but I just turned 69. And as I was approaching 69, I started thinking, man, 69 is almost 70. Now, there's one really amazing, wonderful thing about turning 70 is I've delayed my Social Security. And so I guess the month after I turn 70, I'll start getting this extra several $1,000s a month from the federal government that I know I've put into, but it sort of feels like free money, right? And so that part, sort of is that like this huge pile of icing on top of the cake. But by most standards, people will call 70 old. And I actually don't feel very old. So I was sort of talking about this a few weeks ago at a conference. I was talking to Bill Pettit, and he sent me this clip where Toby Keith had interviewed Clint Eastwood, and he was asking Clint Eastwood how Meg. I know you know this quote. I can see the smile on your face. How he kept going and accomplishing so much, even in his late 80s and into his 90s. And he said, I just made a decision to not let the old man in. And Toby Keith ultimately wrote a song about it. So how do you feel? I mean, to me, and I found it to be very, very helpful. And I think that it speaks to the stereotype of the things you can't do. And what he was really saying, as I view it, is that I'm pushing the stereotypes of all the things I can't do away. So I love your thoughts.
I think it's important to push those stereotypes away. Absolutely. It's interesting that he said, I decided not to let the old man in. And that the word old, by the way, we could talk about the word old. And in my mind, we should, the word old should not be considered, should not be affiliated. We should try not to affiliate it with stereotypes about decline any longer. And we could repossess the word old and make it a positive. Right. But obviously we know that what he meant was he was probably said, I'm going to hold positive age beliefs or correct age beliefs, however you want to say it. But I think that you're not getting into too much toxicity, because getting old can be very hard, can be difficult for a lot of people. And much of the getting old that's difficult is due to ageism. So,
yeah. So I want to actually shift if we can. We don't have a lot of time left, but I want to talk a little bit about ageism and senior living specifically. One of the big challenges I have in this whole ageism discussion is that I see a lot of people sort of complaining about the ageism that comes with jokes and mostly, probably more often humor. Ashton Applewhite, who, as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of, finds ageism in just about everything. And I find the biggest problem, I have two problems with that. A lot of it is I just think it's not a great way to live your life. But the other problem I have with it is that I think when we find ageism in things that are relatively trivial, it causes us to miss real ageism. And I have real concern that ageism happens thousands of times a day across the country, every single day in senior living communities. And it's subtle, but it comes in the form of, don't complain. We've created this big, beautiful place that you're living in, and we've got this nice activities room, and look at how beautiful this is. And we've got this great activities, and we're feeding you 3 meals a day, and we're taking care of your laundry and your medications. And how dare you complain about anything? And I think that the other thing that happens is, oh, look at all these cute residents. Those are real ageism things that I find very, very offensive. And I'd love to have you guys just your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. Jordan, I'll let you go first since I'm.
Yeah. You're muted. Jordan, you're muted. You're muted.
There's ageism that's inside the community on not respecting the rights of residents, in that this is their home. There's from people not respecting it as if it's their home, to residents not respecting other residents who have aged differently than they are or than they have. And then, kind of otherizing those who have, sort of problems with ADLs as they age. There's a big culture in some life planning communities where there's, this kind of taboo of talking about memory care or the nursing home that's on site, as if that's for those people, I'm not going to go there. And then there's the ageism outside, that what we really talk about a lot is just the ageism around the industry itself, and how we view these homes, where people's homes. There's there's around 14,000 McDonald's in the United States. And
12,000.
there's 33. Well, I was trying to look up the most recent number, so now it's 14.
Oh.
But there are 33,000 assisted living communities in the United States. Now, if you ask someone on the street, if you did a man on the street, where's the closest McDonald's? People can tell you, and they'll tell you the closest one. But if you ask them where their closest assisted living community is, they're going to have a hard time really answering that question. And so there may be, so you might actually run by, if you do this at a local, because of leading age, you might get a different answer.
I mean, on top of that, there are 15,500 nursing homes or so thereabouts, right, in the U.S. So you add that to assisted living. I think a bulk of those assisted livings are very small, one home in a home assisted livings. But there's a huge number, let's say, of senior living communities in this country where people don't know what's inside them and who is inside of them. And to speak of the internally, Steve, you alluded to the baby talk. Oh, look how cute, the belittling and I think sometimes infantilizing talk that happens. I think it's well-intentioned, but I think that is something that can be ageist and probably harmful. And then there's the long-standing issue of segregating folks. I think it probably mostly happens in like AL/IL, like segregating the dining room and IL from the dining and AL, and making sure that the two don't meet or that the two dine separately. That's ableist as well as ageist, in my opinion. So there's a lot of that combining in senior living too. The ableism and the ageism as well.
Yeah. These things they're very, very difficult because some of this stuff, some of it is reality. I mean, one of the things that somebody had pointed out to me a few weeks ago, and I've talked to just a few people about this, is that you go into a CCRC, so you put down hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then you pay thousands of dollars a month. And you start out as an independent living resident. Typically, you're pretty active in doing things. You may if you sort of progress through all the levels, you're going to hit assisted living for a while. And then if things, your body is really failing you, you may end up in a nursing home. And oftentimes, even in the really nice CCRCs, if you end up in this nursing home, you're going to end up sharing a bed with somebody, sharing a room with somebody who is, maybe in worse shape than you, maybe in better shape than you. But really thinking about the sort of the lack of dignity after you've worked hard and saved all this money to be able to afford these nice things. And then they come to you and say, oh, well, the last few months you're going to go spend in this room with some other person who's about to die is pretty discouraging. And so you start to see, some of the so-called stereotypes are maybe reasonable reactions to what we've created, and a wake-up call to what we need to do better. Absolutely. So,
yes.
And so I guess it's really where I come back to why I love what you guys are doing, because I think more than anything else with Art Against Ageism is what you're asking people to do is just take a step back and just think about how they are interacting with, I guess I can say this now, us old people. And that maybe your approach, because of our age, their age, is very, very, is not fair. And that it is taking away from their lives. And I think, Meg, you said it, or Jordan, I can't remember which, you're all going to be old like me one day. And you're going to be older than me if you're lucky. Last words?
Yeah. How about aging equals living? So
aging equals living. I love that. Jordan?
No, she said it best. Aging equals living.
Yeah, I mean, it is. There are challenges that come with aging. I'm spending more time at doctors. I am spending more time thinking about what's going to happen, as I approach the end of life. I'm experiencing people I love who are declining much rapidly because they're more older, but it certainly beats the alternative, right? So, Meg, Jordan, thank you so much for your passion on this. Thank you for joining me and having this great debate.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.